Thank you, everyone, tuning into the Daily Caller today. As you know, we cover politics, entertainment, sports, and today we got a great crossover on all three of those. We got Nik Lentz from the UFC. Nick, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, honored to be here, man.
So right away, you're wearing a Hillary for Prison shirt. So anyone who follows you on Twitter, anyone that knows anything about you, knows your political beliefs. So let's just dive right in. How fun of a year? How much did you enjoy the 2016 presidential election?
A lot of people always said like 2016 was like the worst year ever, but to me and my wife, we had a blast. It was one of the most eye-opening things, but I had a lot of sleepless nights too. There's been multiple points where, I thought Hillary Clinton could have been our president, and we would have really stepped backwards. Just the whole movement. I worked on with Ron Paul on the campaign trail in Minnesota, trying to get him elected. I tried to do a lot of stuff. So throughout my whole life, I've been kind of into the political / conspiracy world. And so now, it's a little easier for me to speak out. When I first started in the UFC, it was a little nerve-wracking for me to express my political views and all that stuff. And as this has gone on, it's opened up a whole new world to me, and I can actually make my private feelings public.
Well, so that brings up a very good point, a very good question. So when you first, when the election just ended, Trump was the president-elect, you're on Twitter in the following months, you're very open, very active, very supportive. Did anyone come to you and they're like, hey, Nick, shut the hell up. We don't need you talking politics. That's not your thing. It's bad. Did anyone from the UFC tell you that? Did any of your friends tell you that? Or were they all on board with, hey, he wants to express his opinion. This is America. Let the man talk.
No, the UFC has never told me I couldn't do anything. This was just when I first got in the UFC 8 years ago, it was kind of self-policing. There was a lot of things I didn't talk about. But as far as people telling me not to do it, people tell me on Twitter all day, whether it's bots or trolls or whoever, they yell at me all day. I get thousands of messages from people telling me to shut up and stay in my lane. But the funny part is I'm a good fighter. I'm a good professional fighter. But I could be the worst MMA fan that's ever lived. I don't watch the fights. I don't know that much about the fighters, politics, and the political nature of the world is what is my hobby. That's what I'm into. So for them to tell me to talk more about fighting will be very hard because I don't even know the guys in my own weight class, much less the rest of the UFC. So when I talk about fighting, unless you want to get an in-depth technical analysis, which most people don't want because they don't understand, then you probably don't want me talking about fighting.
Right. So were you, you got the shirt on, so were you going to vote for whoever the Republican candidate was no matter what? Or were you more of,
No.
It was Trump, I like Trump, Trump's my guy, and I also hate Hillary, it's the perfect storm?
No, at first, I wasn't on board with the Trump movement, because I've been a libertarian my whole life, pretty much. When I used to drive to a separate wrestling practice after school, and the car I drove in had only AM, and I listened to this dude named Jason Lewis on the radio, and that's where I kind of learned my political stuff, and I started realizing that Democrats talk a lot, but they don't do anything. And I also grew up in a very poor neighborhood. I was poor most of my life, living in what a lot of people would consider the ghetto and stuff like this. So I saw firsthand that even though we vote for Democrats there, you don't get anything. They don't return the favors. There's nothing that ever happens that they do. They just keep you hook, line, and sinker, so you have to keep voting for them. They don't fix your schools. They don't do anything. So when Trump came around, at first I didn't know what to think about him because he's been a liberal, for a large majority of his life. But now, it's more considered like a populist. But, he was the first person in a long time that actually stood for something and said it. For the longest time, this movement has needed someone just to say what we were all feeling. Build a damn wall. Start enforcing our laws. Start doing something instead of just talking. And when he did that, even though I probably agree with maybe 80% of his agenda, that's still a passing grade, and it's far better than I would ever give like a crooked Hillary or anything.
So you bring up a point about finally Trump was a politician, that he went out there, he just said what he was thinking, said things that a lot of people probably agreed with but didn't publicly want to state. And we have politicians on both sides that They go out there and they blow smoke all day, and we all know the moment they get back to Washington, D.C., they're just going to fall into their party lines and the campaign's over. They have no promises to uphold. He was different. That's very true. Now, I come from Wisconsin. Trump won Wisconsin. It was the first time since a Republican since Reagan had. My understanding is you do train out of Minnesota. You have spent the majority of your life in Minnesota. Is that correct?
Well, I currently live in South Florida, but I grew up in Texas, moved in high school to Minnesota, stayed there for a large part of my career, and then I just recently, in the last couple of years, I moved to Florida.
Okay, so you've seen a wide variety of different people in Texas, Minnesota, Florida. If you could go to these Washington, D.C. politicians that are so clearly out of touch, you're like, hey, this is what people in Minnesota are like. What the hell don't you understand about this is what we need? What message would you try to convey? Like, where's the disconnect? What are they not understanding about the guy who's working at a factory in Wisconsin or the guy who's working in the Twin Cities with 2 kids in Minnesota? What do you think they're just not grasping about those people's lives?
Well, what are we talking about? Politicians?
Yeah, politicians. Why do you think politicians just don't seem to understand the flyover states, middle America? Why do you think they just don't seem to, one, understand, or maybe two, they just don't care?
Well, I think the vast majority of it is that they don't care. You know, they're hollow people. You know, to get far in politics, for the most part, you have to be somewhat of a shady character that's very self-absorbed. You know, to deal with that kind of pressure and to work your way up to the top. And a lot of these people, you know, Republicans, Democrats, they're the same thing. You know, they're owned by the same corporations. They all bow down to the same banks and whatever you want to call it. But if there's finally a revolt from the people, because they're finally saying, hey, you keep promising us things, but you're not giving it to us. You know, you keep promising us that you're going to fix our schools, but our schools are worse than they've ever been, and we spent millions of dollars on them. You keep promising us all these things, but we're not going to do it. And I think the last straw, when it came down to it, is the whole, you know, privilege thing. So they told a factory worker who's making no money, who has no job, they took away all of his industry, and then they went and told him, hey, guess what? You're a privileged white guy. And they said, what are you talking about? You know, I've been broke my whole life. I have nothing. And you guys took it all away from me. So there's been a revolt like that. And that's happening everywhere. That's happening in inner cities. That's happening in everywhere else, whether they take away the gun rights and then the crime explodes and they can't defend themselves, whether you go to a city like Chicago and then you start to see that there's a revolt in all of our races, all creeds. They're all starting to wake up to the real idea that these politicians don't care. They don't fill in their promises, and everything they say is a lie. And even though Trump says moronic things sometimes, or he might just speak off the cuff, I don't care. He at least is truthful, and he at least does what he says he's going to do.
Or he tries to do what he says he's going to do. Now, there's been problems with the Senate and the House on health care. They're not moving the ball down the field. Now, you'd have some news organizations like CNN, MSNBC, some of these left-wing outlets that have said it's just absolute chaos in the Trump White House. It's just complete chaos. No one knows what's going on. Do you buy into any of that, or do you think that's the news just trying to push a narrative? They want ratings, and if there's just even a little bit of turmoil, we're going to throw gasoline on this fire just for the sake of drawing as many viewers as we can. Doesn't matter if it's real.
Well, I think it's a mixture. You know, I think when Trump first came in, he tried to bring the parties together. You know, he tried to play nice with people. And he doesn't. I think he didn't realize just how shallow these people are. You know, I mean, Trump is an odd guy because he's got billions of dollars and stuff. But he generally, I think, wants to help people. So I mean, he's at the end of his life. You know, he's an older guy. He wants to see the world a better place. And so when he goes and talks to Democrats, I'm sure to his face they're very nice. But I'm sure the second he leaves, they just try to stab him in the back. And I think he's slowly trying to please like a New York Times or something, or all these people, when you can't. You know, you just can't do it. And even though we have someone like Scaramucci who just went crazy, you know, mouthing off to some New Yorker article person, even that, you know, I'm disappointed that he's fired. Who cares what the mainstream media says? But no, nobody even watches CNN. They have like 800,000 viewers. I mean, there's people online that get that talking about reviews for pens or something. It's a dying structure. So the entire mainstream media, including Fox News, which is just mainstream media light. Yeah. So it's a dying breed. They're gonna hold on and try to grasp to it. They're gonna try to slow this movement down. But the fact is that even if they get rid of Trump, what people don't understand is this really didn't have anything to do with Trump. Trump just was the guy who happened to step in at the right time and follow the nationals, movement that we've been setting up for years and years.
Well, do you think that environment is one of the reasons why some of these more right-leaning or conservative news websites have kind of exploded in this new environment? Like the Daily Caller, for example, is thriving. And I think, as someone who works here and someone who's observed, is because we're an anti-establishment. We don't buy into what CNN says. We don't trust on face value what MSNBC. Do you think that American awakening is part of the reason some of these websites, these right-leaning websites, have done so well in the past year and a half?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's people naturally are attracted to truth, whether it's a God-given gift or whatever it is. When you look at something and you know that at least the person's at least attempting 100% to tell the truth, whether they make a mistake or not, you can sense that, and the population is waking up to that. When you watch CNN, it's fake. You can even see their eyes moving. They're just teleprompter readers. They know nothing about anything in real life. And being a UFC fighter, I've had the privilege of meeting some of these people. I've had the privilege of meeting famous people from Hollywood. I've had the privilege. And when you meet them in person, you're like, they're just shells of people. They don't really know anything. They don't really say anything. You could ask a CNN person about what they just talked about, and unless they spouted off Russia 18,000 times, they wouldn't even know. They just read off the teleprompter.
Okay, Nick, I got one real quick last question on the political thing. It's a two-parter. Part number one, if you could see Donald Trump get in the octagon with any one of his political opponents, who would you like it to be?
Interesting question, because I don't feel like men should be fighting women in the octagon.
Okay.
But that's kind of a messed up thing. I'm not too cool with that. But I would say probably Cryin Chuck Schumer.
There we go. Cryin Chuck Schumer. Fake tears, the fake tears of Cryin Chuck Schumer.
He could stand to catch a
Very fair, very fair. Well, Nick, if you keep bringing the truth on Twitter, we'll keep bringing the Daily Call. We'll keep bringing the truth to the best of our ability. Real quick here, before we let you go, you do have a fight upcoming. Why don't you tell the audience about that and what you're hoping, what you're expecting, and the details of that fight?
I'm fighting Will Brooks October 7th in Las Vegas for UFC 216. It's going to be a great fight. It's a big fight. Will Brooks is a very good opponent. He was an ex-Bellator champion. He switched over to the UFC. It's a fight made for me. So if you want to watch the fight, I encourage you to do so. If you want to follow me on Twitter and know what's happening in the world.
What's your Twitter handle for all of our millions of fans out there?
At Nik Lentz, at NIKLENTZ. Hit me up, whether you like me or hate me. I try to respond to you. Say something mean to me, I will troll you. I'm pretty witty. So, that's pretty much it. I appreciate you guys spending the time.
Well, Nick, I'd like to thank you for taking a little time out of your very busy schedule to join us. I'd like to thank everyone who tuned in to watch this. And like you said, his name's Nik Lentz. You can follow him at Twitter, at Nik Lentz. And best of luck in your upcoming fight. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, guys. God bless.